Am I crazy, or is this UK digital panopticon law the latest iteration of Gaza is the trial run for what Western governments can get away with doing to their own citizens? Yes. No, it is absolutely that. The prescription of Palestine action is another one. Dude, there's still people coming in here to be like, you're a piece of shit. It's like, dude, give it up. We're cooked. All of us are, whether you hate me or not, all of us are in this together. And this is exactly what Taylor Lorenz is talking about in this video from 2 weeks ago. The UK just censored the entire internet.
Back to Free Speech Friday, my series where I cover the fight for free expression, privacy, and civil rights online. The UK's new age verification law just went into effect, and it's already preventing anyone under the age of 18 from accessing information on Reddit about Israeli war crimes. This is yet another example of why these kids' online safety age verification laws are really only about one thing: censorship. The law mandates age verification across all platforms that carry adult content. But as I'm going to explain in this video, that means every single platform. Because while these laws are falsely framed as cracking down on porn, what they deem adult content is far more wide-reaching than you might think. This is why young people suddenly have to upload their government ID or face scan themselves to do things like listen to Spotify or watch YouTube. Every social media app, because it contains news content, is considered adult. This means that everyone, not just kids, but everyone, is now legally required in the UK to upload things like their government-issued ID, live selfies, biometric facial recognition.
I feel like this is one of the most insane ways to try and actively combat the problem of child predation, or like exposing children to what the government decides is inappropriate content. The reason why I think this is incredibly scary immediately is, remember that app that came out? I didn't really cover it that much. I briefly touched on it. The T app. It initially started as an application with, I guess, some semblance of honest concern. It was supposed to warn other women that were on the app of men that might do something violent to them, men that have done things that are violent. But it very quickly also spun out of control and turned into like a gossip application. There is no like proof that anyone was doing anything else. Like, people who were scorned could just like easily can be like, this is a bad person, this is a rape, whatever. I mean, it's literally titled T app. But the story doesn't end there. The T application got hacked. And a part of the T application was that you had to upload your identification to use it. And then all of the people that had uploaded their IDs to actually use the app created a map basically with their zip code, their permanent home address, their identification, their faces. It's crazy. Men downloaded the Counter app using the same programming and got their info leaked too. Yeah, and then there was another Counter app that came out as well. So anyway, the application started. The application started off with let's say earnest intention, and then it turned into something that might not be so earnest. But then also, as a counter to that, people went in the opposite direction and leaked the personal data of so many people. And then on top of that, incels went and made a reverse version of this where like, men talk about shitty women. Okay. And then now that application is also leaking data. T on her, the male version of T, is leaking personal information on its users too. Last week, we reported about some serious leaks in T Dating Advice, an app that provides a space for women to exchange information about men they know, have met, or have dated in the past. The app aims to provide a platform where people can share relevant information about, say, potential abusive partners. However, it leaked images and private messages, leading to 10 potential class action lawsuits in federal and state courts for negligent data practices. Now it has been revealed that the male equivalent, T on her, has exposed users' personal information as well, including government IDs and selfies. T on her, which ranks high in the lifestyle apps category for iOS, allows men to share photos and information about women they have dated. It appears to have been designed with a sense of vengeance against the T dating app. It uses similar language to the App Store description, and as it turns out, is just as leaky. The IDs on T were stored in a database that was just literally publicly accessible, not defending anything, just adding to the story. TechCrunch reports it found at least one vulnerability that allows any user access to other users' email addresses, driver's licenses, self-reported location, and selfies. Perhaps most distressingly, the news outlet also discovered that guest users could view explicit images of women, likely shared without consent. TechCrunch has also found an email address and password on the app's creator. Are you serious? Are you insane? TechCrunch found an email address and password of the app's creator? Although it didn't test that hypothesis for legal reasons, it seems likely using those credentials might provide access to the administrator panel of the app. It is disappointing that apps made for sharing private information and ranked so high in the App Store apparently have such poor security standard. Okay, I don't know anything about app creation, but this smells like it was made with AI. This smells like AI was a part of the coding process. I say this as someone with zero knowledge of how to make an app, but it looks to me like, oh, Sean is saying it was. There it is. Of course. Vibe coding apocalypse. He admits to using Claude. It's really cool that a lot of these companies are actually moving in the direction of using AI instead of real humans too, by the way. You know? I'm sure that won't lead to additional problems. Amazing. Amazing. This is what TechCrunch found. Bro left his email and pass in the API documentation. No way. Okay, that has to be a honeypot then. No way. That seems like that was done deliberately then to get like a bunch of men who wanted to get on the Vengeance app. Oh my God, his password was password 1. I'm seeing it in front of me. In the document cloud, it's the back end page. It has it all. Are you kidding me? His password is password 1 exclamation mark. Are you joking? Why is that in the T on her API backend page? Not even password 2? Password 1 is like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of passwords. At least you got to trick him a little bit. Make him use, do password 2 or something. At least make him do 2 tries, Password 1 is actually very secure because nobody would try something that simple. Placing this here so people have a rundown. T-App hosts all non-code assets, UI images, customer uploads, messages in a public cloud bucket that anyone with a browser can access without a password. Some guy finds it and posted on 4chan yesterday morning. Turns out there are 1,000 women's driver's licenses on there. Within minutes, the licenses are scanned, probably with a vision model, for addresses, and map pins are created that link the UUID of the images in the data set, thereby doxing thousands of women. The pins are not geos, they're home addresses, which is kind of worse. The moral of the story is security is job 1. Both the customers and the company did dumb things, and now there's going to be massive fallout. Yeah, they literally, they call it the roasties, which is, 4chan, incel speak for women. And they're saying like, to say, is an incel gross word to say women. It comes from roast beef. They say incels believe that women who have a lot of sex, they don't know anything about the biology. They think that like women have a lot of sex, have a big growing. Don't explain it. I'm explaining it because it's idiotic. It's my job. Why do you know this lore? I don't know, because I've been duking it out with incels and brain rot for as long as I've been a professional political commentator, because I do it online. Also, explaining it is good because then you know when you see it in the wild.
Credit card info, and more, just to use major platforms like Reddit, Twitter, Blue Sky, and thousands of independent websites. I have an entirely separate video breaking down the problems with age verification more broadly, which I'm linking here. But privacy issues aside, these age verification systems are going to lead to devastating censorship of our news and information landscape, which will ultimately leave young people less informed. Like all of these terrible online censorship bills, the Online Safety Act claims that it's about protecting children from the evils of pornographic and adult content. But immediately after it went into effect, platforms began classifying nearly all breaking news footage, investigative journalism, political protest material, and reporting on the ongoing atrocities around the world as explicit, harmful, and adult content, blocking anyone under the age of 18 from accessing it. In the UK, under the Online Safety Act, access to subreddits dedicated to covering war crimes,
Am I crazy, or is this UK digital panopticon law the latest iteration of Gaza is the trial run for what Western governments can get away with doing to their own citizens? Yes. No, it is absolutely that. The prescription of Palestine action is another one. Dude, there's still people coming in here to be like, you're a piece of shit. It's like, dude, give it up. We're cooked. All of us are, whether you hate me or not, all of us are in this together. And the quicker you recognize that, the easier things will go for you, or else you're just going to be angrily posturing all up and down the internet in perpetuity, not realizing why things just suck, why there is mass surveillance, for example.
The genocide in Gaza, or providing crucial information on reproductive health or sex education now require age verification. As The Verge reported, quote, effectively, web platforms must either set up an age verification system that poses potential privacy risks.
Anyway. Let's get back to the Online Safety Act.
Huge swaths of potentially questionable content, or entire residents are finding themselves locked out of anything from period-related subreddits to hobbyist forums. 4 out of the top 5 free apps on the UK Apple Store right now are VPN services, as people are desperately trying to circumvent these filters and access crucial news information. But many systems have ways to detect VPNs, and the government will likely crack down on VPN use as well. Users on Reddit are reporting entire subreddits are now blocked in the UK. A post on one tech support subreddit shows the message, quote, due to local laws, we are temporarily restricting access to this content until we can estimate your age. Users on r/UK politics encountered a message reading, quote, if you have a standard X account in the UK, presumably the vast majority of British users, you cannot see any protest footage that contains any violence tonight because of the Online Safety Act. Reddit has also blocked access to specific subreddits that contain crucial public health related information, like r/periods, r/stop smoking, r/stop drinking, and other subreddits that provide essential community support to users, including minors, like r/sexual assault, for example. These are all blocked. In fact, young people cannot access any information about sexual assault or potential abuse under these new child safety laws, meaning that they're actually less able to identify abuse and more likely to be exploited. The stuff that's being blocked under these child safety laws, like war reporting, human rights documentation, protest footage, LGBTQ and reproductive justice content, is essential content that all young people should have access to in order to remain informed about the world. This mass gating of information is preventing people under 18 in the UK from accessing things like independent reporting, witness testimony of crimes, community analysis of war atrocities. Instead, young people are being fed a sanitized, mainstream, government-approved version of the internet. It's crucial for young people to learn and become educated about the world, and also to be able to gain access to information outside government propaganda and the mainstream media, which, let's be honest, mostly regurgitates government propaganda. These child safety laws limit young people's opportunities for critical thinking and civic understanding, and they isolate young people from global perspectives and from connecting with other young people in foreign countries like Palestine or China. And the way that enforcement of these child safety laws works, platforms are forced to err on the side of caution by over-blocking vague categories of potentially disturbing content rather than having a more liberal approach. Young people are also being forced to provide highly sensitive personal data like their government documents, selfies, and biometric scans. Organizations including the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the Open Rights Group have flagged serious concerns that these age verification policies are a privacy nightmare. And meanwhile, these free VPNs that everyone's downloading to even less regulated corners of the web, which totally undermines the people in power's whole stated goal of child safety. Not to mention the proliferation of free and shady VPN apps also raises privacy risks. And if you think that this is only happening in the UK, I need you to wake up, because the US Supreme Court has upheld age verification laws at every state level, with states like Nebraska and New York adopting similar frameworks to the UK. Australia and Ireland are also introducing variants of age checks and digital ID systems. Both the Democrats and the Republicans are completely aligned in ramming age verification laws through Congress and removing all free speech and the right to anonymity on the web. Leftists have completely dropped the ball on this issue. There is no meaningful opposition to this stuff in the US outside a few fringe libertarian groups and some journalists. And a lot of people on the left have spent the past several years feeding into the exact moral panic nonsense that these laws are predicated on. Also, I just want to reiterate again that age verification does not protect the youth from anything but information that the government doesn't like. Young people still find a way to access porn. They're simply locked out of accessing crucial content about news, health, privacy, etc. These laws also don't account for educational use or parental supervision on different platforms. They just create this binary system where all graphic or controversial or news content is treated the same, regardless of the context that it's presented in. We need to do everything we can right now to fight back against the moral panic about social media and fight these atrocious censorship bills that erode our civil liberties and destroy our right to free speech and free expression online. All right, that's it for this week's Free Speech Friday. Don't forget to subscribe to my tech and online culture newsletter, User Mag.
Isn't there another one that she did on this issue? Oh, the worst
Full
updated
biometric scans just to watch certain YouTube videos. YouTube is the... Welcome back to Free Speech Friday, my series covering the fight for free expression and civil liberties online. This week, YouTube rolled out in the US. It forces users who the company's AI system guesstimates might be under 18 to submit their government IDs or full biometric scans just to watch certain YouTube videos. YouTube is the first major tech platform to preemptively normalize invasive identity.
Here's a video on COSA. Oh. This is the one I was looking for.
What we're doing is handing a weapon to the government that can be whatever the government wants. And when that weapon targets speech and ideas, it's a real big problem.
Welcome back to Free Speech Friday. Today, I want to talk to you guys about one of the most dangerous laws in Congress right now. It's called the Kids Online Safety Act, and it was recently reintroduced by a bipartisan group of lawmakers, but it's being heavily pushed by the Democrats. It's a law that claims to make kids safer online, but please don't let the name fool you, because this law would give the government unprecedented power to censor speech across the entire internet in the name of protecting kids. From mental health support communities to LGBTQ forums, COSA endangers the very spaces that young people turn to for help, identity, and connection. The Heritage Foundation has come out and said that it plans to use COSA to censor LGBTQ content off the internet. And Marsha Blackburn, the bill's co-sponsor, said that COSA must be passed in order to, quote, protect minor children from the transgender in this culture. Today, to help me break the whole bill down, is Ari Cohen from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Freedom. He's a brilliant tech policy expert and one of the foremost free speech lawyers in the country. Ari, welcome to Free Speech Friday.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like you and I have discussed COSA before on this very podcast, I think.
Too many times.
Okay, so this law sounds pretty good, I think, to a lot of people that don't know what's going on. Why is it so dangerous? Walk me through kind of the biggest reason why COSA is so harmful and will lead to such censorship.
So the law includes something that's called a duty of care. And it requires social media platforms basically to protect people against certain kinds of harms like anxieties, suicidal ideations, eating disorders, things like that. That requires platforms to look at content and say, this is going to cause someone harm. And if it is, what they're going to do is they are going to stop kids from seeing it because they could get in trouble if it causes some kind of damage, or even the government thinks that it might.
So I want to give people a concrete example, because when you say it requires the platforms to prevent showing harmful content, that sounds good, right? Give me an example of how that might play out in a negative way. Because I think the biggest issue here is that platforms, what someone considers harmful content, especially under the Trump administration, is LGBTQ content, right?
That's exactly right. And this duty, it applies to the design features. So say the content recommendation system, the algorithm that provides you what's on your feed. Take the example you just gave, LGBT content. There is a contingent on the right that thinks that kids are turning trans just because they read things on the internet. Say the Attorney General of the United States sends a letter to Facebook saying...
This is what happens when the dumbest, most hateful people are the ones making all of the decisions. It's so crazy.
This is harmful material for children. What's Facebook going to do? They're going to tailor the content recommendation system so that it excludes anything related to being transgender whatsoever, because that is the safest thing for them to do. So nobody can say you're causing kids harm, which means you're not going to see any trans related content if you're a minor, which means if you are trans, you might think you are all alone. You are not going to be able to find support, community, resources, or anything like that in the way
Tea leaf, free leaf. Thank you for the 50 gifted subs.
that I, as a little gay kid in a religious Jewish community who had never even heard of the fact there were other gay people, was able to find support and community on the internet when I was a kid. We're basically going backwards.
Yeah. And especially, I think, to do it at this time when we know other stuff that's considered harmful content is reproductive justice content, information about women's health care, anything about women's issues, civil liberties, social justice issues. These are all considered sort of harmful content, anxiety inducing.
And what's harmful content will grow and change and morph with whatever the subjective values of the person doing the determination is at any given time. And Republicans should probably beware as well, because when Democrats get elected into office again, should they ever decide they want to win an election, what's going to happen? They're going to target stuff that the right likes and say that's harmful to minors. What we're doing is handing a weapon to the government that can be whatever the government wants. And when that weapon targets speech and ideas, it's a real big problem.
Well, let's talk about some of those problems, because everything you just said, I think, again, to people sounds great, right? Like all they hear about all day is the harms of these platforms. And obviously these platforms do a lot of really nefarious bad things. But this law, I would argue, is really dangerous and bad. Number one is the censorship, right? Like this is essentially a coded censorship bill. So can you sort of walk me through how that sort of like duty of care could be weaponized to silence speech?
Quite easily, in fact. First of all, the original version of COSA didn't revolve around quote unquote design features. What it did was it imposed a duty of care to prevent and mitigate those classifications of harm. And that initially drew criticism, including from me, because a duty of care means platforms, first of all, they have to figure out how users will reasonably react to certain content. And the problem with all of these kids bills so far is that they treat minors as a monolith. They treat them as a big group that all have the same interests and the same mental state, the same capacity, and it requires them to treat them all the same. But different kids, particularly with respect to, say, a 14-year-old versus a 17-year-old, have different reactions, different experiences, different ways they manage and cope with different content. And even within the same age range, different kids are different. They have different life experiences. They don't all react to content in the same way. So how platforms are supposed to figure it out for kids as a whole, I don't know. Media platforms have to be each kid's virtual psychiatrist. And if you don't trust social media companies to be taking care of kids in the first place, I don't know why you would trust them to do that. Either way, it's an impossibility. So what results from that is that platforms have to basically restrict for minors everything but the safest content.
When you say safest, like what does that even mean?
That's a great question. I don't know. Basically, like the content that would not even set off a reaction in even the most sensitive kid. And that's basically nothing. And we've been here before. Parents have tried to sue broadcasters, video game makers, the makers of Dungeons and Dragons for quote unquote harming kids, and the courts have all rejected the duty of care on First Amendment grounds because they've said that would basically restrict allowable speech to the most sensitive members of society. So what did the COSA sponsors decide to do? They made it, instead of directly about the content, they said, okay, this is only about design features. And to some people, that would seem to make sense. But let me read you again. Take reasonable care in the creation and implementation of any design feature to prevent and mitigate, say, mental health disorders, including anxiety, depression, eating disorders, substance use disorders, and suicidal behavior. So take infinite scroll, because that's usually cited as one of these design features.
And just infinite scroll means basically a feed that continues to refresh.
Right. So I'm not sure how infinite scroll, if you don't consider the content at all, could possibly cause an eating disorder. It would always have to do with the content that is displayed. And also, the fact of the matter is, Twitter's feed, Facebook's wall, what have you, those are all also design features. There is no way to mitigate against these harms that very content-based harms without considering the content, because features don't do anything to kids at all. They're just there.
Let's like kind of put this a lot more in like layman's terms. What you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is they've tried to sort of reform this bill, which was essentially, it sort of fell off the map initially because it was very obviously a censorship bill. Now they're back saying like, we're not regulating the content, we're regulating these dangerous features, like keeping kids scrolling forever and these dangerous design features. And this is what you hear also from these groups that I deeply disagree with, like design it for us. And they're like, it's the features that are the problem, not the content. But as you're saying, you can't really decouple the two, because a feature in itself isn't inherently harmful. It's the content that it's delivering that is being litigated.
I always tell people, if we were in a situation where social media presented nothing but educational content and funny cat videos, and kids were like staying up late at night under their comforter, like unable to sleep because they're so too busy learning from social media, and they were sleeping too much during class because they were up late all night learning, would we have this same panic? No. No, we wouldn't. It is all about the content, and they barely try to hide it. And now they're like trying just a little bit, and it's still completely insufficient, because really what they're going after is the content. And if there's one thing
thank you for
that the First
50
Amendment doesn't
bomb.
allow, it is the suppression of content just because the government finds it objectionable or harmful. And that's what this bill does. And it gives the government a ton of power to decide for everyone what that harmful content is.
I think that's actually such a good way to think about it, because I think actually that's maybe like a good test for any of these internet laws is if the content on these apps was, as you said, like the most wholesome educational videos ever, would this law still be necessary? And no, it wouldn't. I think there's also just a lot that's sort of presupposed in this law. For instance, the idea that social media is inherently harmful and dangerous, and it's leading to compulsive usage and all of these other things. The eating disorder stuff drives me crazy, because I grew up also in the aughts, where when I was a kid, like all we had were these magazines that promoted the most blatant eating disorder. Like the entire media promoted eating disorders. And in fact, we have the body positivity movement because of social media. And girls, young girls today especially, are exposed to more diverse body types because of the internet. And yet we see this sort of trope that the internet is leading kids into these things.
How soon we forget even very recent history. You know, there's also the quote unquote addictive feeds issue. And I am not sure if these people are consumers of any kind of media, because the entire purpose of media is to keep your eyeballs and your attention. And that's why we have cliffhangers at the end of episodes. That is why we have, say, commercials that tease episodes and automatic play of the next episode. It's because the entire purpose of media is to keep you watching. And like, if you try and say that is inherently a bad thing, then where do we go from there? Because what you're saying basically is that addiction to ideas is a thing. I don't want to live in a world where that is a legally cognizable thing, because that is terrifying.
It's even worse than that too, because they're not just saying that like you're addicted to consuming information and entertainment or whatever, which is absurd on its face. Like you said, it's like you're addicted to reading. It's also addicted to communication. I think of Tristan Harris, who I deeply disagree with, talking about Snapchat's streaks feature, which for people who don't know, sort of encourages you to message somebody every day. Like if we message each other each day that we continually message each other counts towards our streak. So if we've had 100-day streak, that means we've sent each other at least one message a day for 100 days. Now, this is something that these people that claim social media is isolating us and it's making us all miserable and all this stuff, you would think that they would actually love, right? Wow, it's encouraging you to keep in touch and directly communicate with your friends. Tristan Harris described it as being chained to your best friend on a treadmill and being forced to run. And like there was all these endless moral panic articles about like the anxiety that's giving kids to break their Snapchat streaks.
That's very like old man yells at cloud territory.
It's absurd, but it leads to legislation like this too, where we know that the primary use of Instagram and most other social media apps among teenagers is actually not even through consent. It's messaging, it's DMs. Adam Asari said that the majority of teens spend most of their time on Instagram in DMs, communicating with each other, messaging each other, group chats basically. And that's what we're telling them is so like negative. And it's like you're addicted to communicating with your friends. It just reminds me of the moral panic over telephones and landlines. And like the woman is talking on the phone for too long, you know, and it's going to destroy her marriage or whatever.
I don't know. I feel like the point of regulation should come at the hardware side. Like it's understandable to demand some kind of limitation for minors and what they do online. I think it's probably not the worst idea, but I don't think ID verification for every single person that is going on a website is the appropriate measure, especially on what the government has decided is what children shouldn't see. You know what I mean? Yeah. I think that so you're pro mass surveillance? No, I said hardware limitations, not mass surveillance. Like having some kind of safeguard that you give to minors that parents should implement, as opposed to mass surveillance, as opposed to having people put their identifications, as opposed to having people put their ID on. Like ID verification is not, ID verification is I think a horrible setup. How does China do it? China has complete ID verification, I think. Everything that you do is connected back to your identity. China is like your wallet, your ID, everything is on your phone already. So China already has the most aggressive forms of government surveillance, which is interesting because a lot of people criticize that kind of government surveillance. But yeah, your identifying number is tied to everything that you're doing, both online and also offline. As a matter of fact, things that you're doing offline still require your online ID. Why is ID a bad thing? Well, one, it improves government surveillance, which already exists. But more importantly, it also opens up every single person to potential harm. Look at what happened with the T application. Look at what happened with the counter T application, where leaks happen and then you have people's identities all over the internet. Think about it like, think about it in the real world. In the real world, imagine demanding IDs for everything that you're doing. Like for walking down the street, for talking to your friend, going to the movie theater. And one might say, well, there's like age, there's some kind of safeguards against like children watching shit that they shouldn't be. And there's truth to that, even though people obviously try to avoid that actively. The only thing that you have an ID verification for is purchasing certain things like alcohol, right? But this basically means like everything requires ID. You're pretending we don't already live in that reality with advertisers? I mean, it's even worse than that, because at least like with advertisers, they have your geolocation, they have all your data. It's harder to trace it. It's harder to track it down and pinpoint it to the user. Whereas with this, it's literally your ID. It's your address and your ID. You could still, you could still pinpoint this information with everything that data brokers sell. But I feel like this is beyond that. An ID scan to buy beer isn't the same as a permanent picture stored in some third-party site. Exactly. This major ID database owned by an Israeli company was revealed to be leaked for 2 years. ID verification service for TikTok, Uber, X exposed driver's licenses. As social networks and porn sites move towards verified identity model, the actions of one cybersecurity researcher showed that ID verification services themselves could get hacked too. Yep. I think you're underestimating how normalized this is for younger people. I just graduated and my teachers could literally see a live feed of my browser at all times, even from home. And trying to write a paper about gun violence meant having the government stats on it be censored by the firewall. I don't think that it's like, I don't think it's better to say, well, it happens already, so we should have more of it, you know? Chatter's University accepted invasive app. Trump announces new health tracking system. Experts raise ethical and legal concerns. Trump announces new health tracking system. Trump admin announces launching a new program that will allow Americans to share personal health data and medical records across health systems and apps run by private tech companies. Are you joking? More than 60 companies, including major tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Apple, as well as healthcare giants like United Health Group and CVS Health, have agreed to share patient data in the system. The initiative will focus on diabetes and weight management, conversational artificial intelligence that helps patients track digital tools such as QR codes and apps that register patients for check-ins or track medications. Bro, I can't tell. I don't know. Everything is so, like, who knows what they could do with this information. I can't tell if I'm being too alarmist about this or if I'm not being alarmist enough about this. You know?
Since they were pushing back in the 70s.
As ever, we've been here before.
Where are these like presupposed beliefs coming from? Why do you think that there is so much stuff in this law that sort of assumes that social media is inherently addicting? It is responsible for the decline of mental health. Like, where do you think this is all coming from?
Well, you get a lot of them from the moral panic pieces, as you said, and a lot of it is also Jonathan Haidt. His book, The Anxious Generation, kind of put it into the mainstream of like pop psychology, basically, even though none of that evidence is causal. It's all correlational. And I'll take your listeners on a brief law tangent, real brief. When laws target speech based on the content of the speech, they have to go through a legal test called strict scrutiny. The courts will apply strict scrutiny. And one of the parts of that test is that the government has to prove that there is an actual problem in need of solving. And when California tried to ban the sale of violent video games to minors, it put forth an expert who put his study there that said this is, correlates with higher mental health problems and acts of violence. And the court said, no, you have to have causal evidence. You have to have actual data that shows this is a problem. And all of the studies so far have said there's a correlation, but there's not necessarily causation. In fact, some studies have found a positive effect on kids' mental health. And so the science is very much not there yet. But Jonathan Haidt keeps pushing for this kind of legislation, saying it's the only thing we can do. It's the only reasonable response to this kind of data, which of course is still correlational. It's just that's a lot of what's driving this.
It is. It's a lot of nonsense. And this is a man, by the way, who's on the board of Barry Weiss's fake censorship university. So I don't think he cares much about the speech concerns here.
Well, he's actually come out and said, oh, Elon Musk and Linda Yaccarino say it's not a free speech problem, as if they are the two foremost experts on First Amendment law in the country. I was like, okay.
Elon Musk, who's banning journalists, who has currently banned multiple journalists for reporting critically on him and is one of the most anti-free speech tech CEOs ever. He's constantly threatening defamation suits around anyone who covers him critically.
My jaw dropped when I saw that. I was like, do you know what a credible source versus a non-credible source is? Because this does not indicate that you do.
He does not. But speaking of Elon, actually, and I think another thing that you hear from people is, well, we've changed COSA a little bit, and now tech companies are on board. X actually supports this legislation. So does Apple. So if it is really so dangerous to these tech platforms and companies, why would Apple and X support these types of laws?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily dangerous to the companies. The companies that operate globally are kind of already set up for compliance, and Apple probably sees itself in a way as already kind of doing all of this in a sense.
Yeah, Apple also doesn't have social media.
Right. And there's a side effect of that. If there's actually a war right now over if there is going to be age verification, should it be the device manufacturer or the app store? And Apple certainly has an interest in that dispute and would much rather it be the social media platforms. The company's job is to look after their bottom line. It's not necessarily their job, although everyone thinks they should look after users' free. Companies might support it, but you have to realize that the company's interests and your interests are not necessarily aligned. In fact, the sponsors of COSA will tell you that users and platforms do not have aligned values, because they are saying over and over and over again how platforms only follow their business interests. They only do what's going to protect their bottom line, which, by the way, means that, yeah, of course they're going to over-censor, because their bottom line says you have to be cautious or you're going to get...
Would an ID ensure accountability for shit like online harassment and other insane shit? Not necessarily. That's something that I've thought about as well. Because one of the oldest things that people say is oh, you wouldn't say that in the real world. You wouldn't say that behind if you weren't behind a keyboard. That's a classic take, right? I mean, I myself have entertained it before as well, or I will regularly say things like, oh, you, under the guise of anonymity, people feel, like they can get away with saying certain things. Okay. Having said that, however, I don't think that this actually fixes the problem at all. One, because I feel like there are places where, similar implementations exist, and that hasn't really cut back on the criminal things that people are doing online. Someone said, yeah, case in point, South Korea. But not only that, but also, I mean, there are so many crimes that the law enforcement, there are so many crimes that law enforcement is just so woefully unequipped to tackle, whether it happens in the physical space or whether it happens online. And especially if it's online, it brings an entirely different brings an entirely different variable. Unequipped or uninterested, I mean, it doesn't really matter whether they are uninterested or truly interested. They just can't do it. That's my point. They haven't been able to do it. I think they are both ill-equipped and also disinterested, for sure. So I just don't know what the proper solution is in general, which sucks because usually I'm supposed to give you, I'm the guy who's supposed to tell you, like, this is what should be done. I worry about, I mean, this is the same principle behind TikTok, right? I talked about how much brain rot TikTok is actually creating and how bad it is. But then also, well, the reason why people wanted to ban TikTok was because of Israel, right? And so very quickly, I was like, all right, well, regardless of the issues, I think we should still allow TikTok to exist. And this kind of feels the same way where, are there tremendous problems with like young people getting brain rotted online? Absolutely. But I don't know if the solution is to make every single person put their identification online so that they can personally use these websites that shouldn't require identification at all, like Spotify or YouTube, and place yourself in the mercy of Palantir. I think parenting as a solution is a cop-out. That's one thing I don't think is appropriate as a retort, for the record. That's like classic right-winger speech, you know, oh, dude, what good parenting is the solution. It's like saying, like, that's not how the government works. You know what I mean? We're talking about regulation. You have to, if we're talking about like the regulatory process, like we can't just talk about how parents need to be better parents. Like, you're right. You're not wrong. It's just like, but that's not the point of contention here.